Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Peter Pitts. I'm the president of the Center for Medicine and the Public Interest, and I'm a former FDA Associate Commissioner, so I'm a former government official here to help. We have an amazing panel today and not a lot of time, so let's get right to it. First, I'd like to introduce Congressman Dr. Mike Burgess, Congressman Admiral Ronny Jackson, and Scott Parkinson. I asked Dr. Burgess and I asked Admiral Jackson, is it Congressman or Doctor or Admiral? And they said, Doctor and Admiral, it polls better. Hear, hear. The power of our free market healthcare system is saving our nation from COVID-19. It took decades of intense human suffering to defeat polio, influenza, measles, mumps, rubella, and a host of awful diseases. But because we were able to harness the power of the American healthcare ecosystem, we developed diagnostics, therapeutics, and now 3 vaccines in 1 year. At warp speed to defeat COVID-19. We win when we work together to unleash the power of free market innovation. And we're the only nation that can do it. But our ability to continue to do so is at risk. Dr. Burgess, you're the senior physician in Congress. Bills such as H.R. 3 pose a direct threat to innovation, intellectual property rights, and the ability for patients and doctors to make their own decisions and choices. How are we going to stop this from happening?
Well, it's going to be tough because, they passed H.R. 3 the October before the pandemic started. When you stop and think about it, Gilead Pharmaceuticals, that they just wanted to trash because of the hepatitis C drug that they had developed, but it was pretty expensive. It had a launch price that the Democrats thought was too high. Gilead at that time was working on remdesivir. No one knew about the novel coronavirus. No one knew that this was going to be the drug that our president would receive in literally less than a year's time to help him in his battle against that. Why would we want to limit the ability to develop these types of products? Now look, I won't mention any names. January of 2020, we were told by all of the high public health officials that under the best of circumstances, it will take 18 months to develop a vaccine if everything goes perfectly, but nothing ever goes perfectly. I don't think they were making that up. That was their world that they lived in. Donald Trump changed the world, and they built that vaccine literally in record time. And you worked at the FDA, okay. Tell me, what the heck takes so long after the company gets all that data and they give it to you? What are you going to find that says, oh, don't release this drug that's 95% effective? I'm sorry, you didn't ask that question, but I'll offer that as an observation. It is, we have to be careful on the legislative front, to be sure, but also on the regulatory front, because we saw how regulations actually can be quite damaging and I think killed people.
Well, let me pick up on that. Since you mentioned the FDA, for reasons that are a bit arcane, President Biden has not yet nominated somebody to be the commissioner of the FDA. What are you looking for in that potential nominee to have you vote for that person enthusiastically?
Well, they do need to be high energy, right? Because there's a lot of work to be done. You need someone who knows the agency. Scott Gottlieb, in many ways, that President Trump chose as his first FDA director, an ideal person. Never hesitated to tell you that he was the smartest person in the room, but it was well placed. He was very knowledgeable, or is very knowledgeable. I know Janet Woodcock is now perhaps in the running for that. She's been there for a long time, but she knows the agency. She knows it very well. She's seen things that go wrong, and that's important as well. You need someone with that, I think, with that institutional knowledge as well.
But relative to H.R. 3, how do you bury this problem child?
Well, look, obviously I will do what I can. I do that every day, but I need your help. And we saw this in the last election. Man, House of Representatives, Republicans actually did much better than anyone gave us credit for. 75 million people voting for President Trump. We just need a lot more of you. And if you will finish that job, we'll make sure that we do block that.
Well, I think we need more doctors and admirals in the House. That's a good start. Admiral Jackson, free market health care is front and center in the debate over not just choice and access, but more broadly over individual liberty and the dangerous growth of intrusive government. Do you see health care and Obamacare 2.0, whatever you want to call it, HR 3, as kind of the focal point of educating the American voter about the importance of health care and its ties with personal liberty, innovation, IP rights, and things such as that?
Absolutely. You know, I think healthcare is just another example of how the Democrats and the far left want to take control of our lives, to be honest with you. The more stuff that they take control of, the more that you are dependent on the federal government, the more they will control your lives and control your votes. And that's what it's about for them. And so they see this as a huge boon, and they're making great progress on this. But, you know, they want to do whatever they have to do to get us all under that umbrella. They want to coerce. You know, we want choice. They want to talk about coverage. We want to talk about care. Coverage is not care, right? Anybody can be covered but not have care, and that's the plan that they put forward. That's what Obamacare does. And so I feel like, you know, we really have to, you know, get back to a system that's driven by the market, a market-driven system. If we don't have a market-driven system, as long as the government or whoever it else is spending someone else's money, they will not care how much money they spend. And they'll drive us into incredible debt with the healthcare system. That's going to happen, right? And don't take this the wrong way. I'm a veteran. I'm a big fan of the VA. But the VA is a perfect example of what we don't want to happen to our country in general. If we get government-mandated, government-controlled health care, it's going to look just like that. The bureaucracy will grow huge, and that's what's happened in the VA to some extent. It's a massive bureaucracy that's between the patient and the doctor. And all of the resources are consumed in that bureaucracy, and they never make it to the patient. So we have to get back to a system of health care that we can afford, that's accessible, that's quality, and that everybody has access to. And that's really where we need to go with this. And a perfect example, Dr. Burgess mentioned it actually, but you know, President Trump got out there, and President Trump did what needs to be done in health care in general. And I think that if he got a second term, you know, he'd talked to me before about it. We'd discussed it. And one of his big agenda items was going to be to go after health care and do to health care what he's done to so many other areas in our government. And that was in large part to deregulate health care, right? The regulations in health care, they drive up the cost unbelievably, right? And the reason that we got the 3 vaccines that we have right now, the only reason we got those 3 vaccines is because of the foresight and the leadership of President Trump, bringing the academic sector, the private sector, and academia together with a focused goal of doing this and removing.
So you're actually saying that good things happened before Biden was elected?
Oh, yeah. You wouldn't know it listening to the far left and listening to the press, but yeah. And a lot of the stuff he didn't get advertised like it should have been, you know, because it wasn't in their best interest for them. And, you know, a lot of the stuff that the left's done to us over the last few years, they did to us even if it wasn't in the best interest of their own constituents, but they did it because they did not want to see Donald J. Trump get a win on anything, no matter how good it was for this country. And we just have to go back to a good, solid, market-driven healthcare system.
So you teed up Operation Warp Speed. Now, right now, it seems like a simple proposition. You let government convene all the parts of the healthcare ecosystem that need to help bring us forward, and then you let them do their thing and you underwrite some of the risk. Why did it take so long? I mean, from your point of view, how do you look at Operation Warp Speed and replicate it going forward so the lessons learned from COVID can be applied kind of across the healthcare spectrum?
Well, first and foremost, you got to have a leader in the White House, right? Somebody who's going to push back, because I've seen this 14 years in the White House. I've seen it all the time. Comes in, good idea comes out, it makes sense. Everybody at the table thinks it's a great idea, and then some bureaucrat in the government says, we can't do that. There's a regulation or a rule or something that says we can't do that. And they abandon the idea because it's then considered not possible. President Trump didn't do that. Every time somebody came to him and said, we can't do that, and he goes, yes, we can. Well, we can't do that in rule or regulation. Change it. Get rid of it. I don't care. We're doing it. And he just pushes forward. We have to have leadership in the White House.
So it's an all hands on deck proposition. When government can set the tone, everybody else falls in line and gets the job done.
All hands on deck to keep the government out of our health care. Absolutely.
Sounds like a Sounds like a T-shirt to me.
Yeah.
Scott, the catchphrase for President Biden, both during the Democrat primary and the national campaign, was Medicare for all. 3 words we're hearing a lot about these days. Wouldn't this actually drive up the costs while reducing the quality of care? And I'd also like you to tie that into Club for Growth's and ACU's involvement with the Coalition Against Socialized Medicine.
Yeah, so let me start off by talking about the Coalition Against Socialized Medicine. ACU was the leader of this group. Club for Growth was also a founding member. And what these organizations pooled together with many other outside issue advocacy groups to do was to fight against that vision of Medicare for all. We think that we need to have Medicare for seniors. We need to protect Medicare, and we need to fight against this idea of a public option. You know, as I think about what these guys are doing on Capitol Hill, it's so much harder for an athlete in basketball to play defense. You get tired. And these guys have constantly been on defense about pre-existing conditions and wanting to rip out the rug from sick people. Instead, we need to go on offense, because it's a lot easier to go on offense against the Democrats. Did you guys know that straw poll that everybody filled out on policies? They talked about what are the top issues and top achievements from President Trump. One of those was repealing the individual mandate through the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It was a huge accomplishment for President Trump. Well, Joe Biden's going to actually try to take that down through executive order, through his health care plan. He wants to mandate that everybody buy in health insurance. And what's that going to do? It's going to make sure that health insurance companies are going to decrease choice and competition in the healthcare marketplace. That's going to jack up the costs. And when you talk about the cost of Medicare for all, man, you said that it's going to be free healthcare for everybody. Wait until they make it free, and we'll see what happens with the real costs.
Speaking of that, well said. If one of the sponsors of this event is Liberty Health Share, and if you believe in the health sharing ministries, Dan Snyder talked about this earlier today, you have to recognize that a bureaucrat with the stroke of a pen can make it go away. And they are going to be empowered under this current administration to take those types of steps. Dr. Burgess, as a physician, do people understand how onerous and awful it is to physicians to have their decisions mandated away by government?
Well, it's not just the government. Certainly HMOs and now ACOs have done their share as well.
PBMs, yeah.
PBMs, another structure that is unnecessary, but it brings nothing but increased costs and decreased access. Look, I'll tell you, when I was in practice, the one thing I hated more than anything else was to have to call 1-800 Minneapolis to get approval from my patient to come in the hospital. And I'd ask the person on the other end, are you licensed to practice medicine in Texas? Well, no. And then it said, well, then you shouldn't be practicing medicine in Texas because I'm in Texas, my patient's in Texas, the hospital's in Texas. Look, I come from I'm a third-generation physician. My grandfather, who I never knew, was a doc. My dad was a doc. I remember my dad telling me, our contract, we are the advocates for the patient at the end of the day. If you work for the hospital, if you work for the insurance company, if you work for the government, guess what? You're advocating for something that may be counter to what your patient is. We need to get back to being the patient advocates. Let doctors be doctors. Let's use all these fine tools we have, but let's use them to make life better for patients and not for the government.
Here, Admiral Jackson, quickly, how do we protect against Uncle Sam becoming Uncle Sam, MD?
Well, we got to do what Scott said. He's exactly right. We got to go on the offensive here. What I'll promise to all of you is that Dr. Burgess, myself, the other members of the Doctors Caucus, our other colleagues in the Republican Conference, we are going to work our butts off over the next few months to come up with a solid health care plan that will be on the offensive, that we can run on, and that we can enact in 2 years when we get the majority back. And we will get the majority back in 2 years.
Scott, last word to you.
You guys all saw Ted Cruz up here on stage saying how we needed freedom. Well, we need healthcare freedom, and you guys need to pressure these guys to make sure we get it done on Capitol Hill. I know that they're going to be leading the charge.
Dr. Burgess, Admiral Jackson, Scott, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.